Okay, we are now recording, and I want to welcome everyone tonight to this chapter 6 of Judges. We'll be studying about Gideon and his calling, his commissioning, and um, we will begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us in his word and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. Okay. All right. So tonight we're going to be looking at Gideon, like I said, and we are right here, right smack in the middle here of the time frame. If you look on the chart there, and here, if you look on this one, is about the same time frame as Deborah, and so we'll see that with Gideon and Deborah, there's about 40 years of peace, and some of that stuff overlaps, so it's a little bit hard to kind of put all of them together. And then there's the mind-boggling chart there. So we'll go ahead with this. There's a lot of scripture. I mean, this is a kind of a long chapter, so, but I'm still going to read it all because people are not. Some people are calling in, and they don't show up. They can't read the script. So then Bnei Israel did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, so that Adonai gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. Midian maintained an upper hand over Israel, and because of Midian, Bnei Israel made themselves hideouts in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. Whenever Israel had done their sowing, the Midianites, Amalekites, and people from the east would come up and raid them. They would set up camp by them, destroying the produce of the land as far as Gaza, and leave nothing in Israel to live on, not a sheep, ox, or donkey. For they would come up with their cattle and their tents, invade like a multitude of locusts. Both they and their camels were innumerable, and they would come to the land to ruin it. So Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai. That came to about when Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai because of Midian, that Adonai sent a prophet to Bnei Israel, and he said to them, "Thus says Adonai, God of Israel, it was I who brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage. Then I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all your oppressors, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. Then I said to you, I am Adonai, your God. You are not to fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are dwelling. But you have not obeyed my voice." All right. So basically, what we've got here, we've got the same thing. Sadly enough, every story begins with, and Bnei Israel did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, or in the eyes of Adonai, or something like that. And so every single time they would say that, they would say that this is basically with the death of Deborah and Barak, that they soon as they died, boy, they just dipped right on down into the valley again or in the sewer, I guess, of sin. And so like the other stories, God had sent a foreign entity. This time it was Midian, and so Midian then oppressed them for 7 years. So let's first of all, let's look at who was Midian. Who were these guys? Now, Abraham had two more sons. Had more sons than just Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac was with his wife Sarah. Ishmael was with Sarah's handmaiden Hagar, and then he also had 6 sons by his third wife or concubine or whatever you want to call her after the death of Sarah, and they were Zimran, Hokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. And you find all that in Genesis 25 too. But so Midian was the fourth son of Abraham with his wife Keturah. So that would have made him like the sixth son. All right, so so therefore the Midianites were the descendants of Midian, and then they were children of Abraham. So they settled in the land of the east, and so most scholars think that Midian, that what that was, they settled east of the land of the Gulf of Aqaba, or they settled in that area that was east of the Gulf of Aqaba. And you'll remember that Moses, when he killed that Egyptian in Egypt, that he had to flee, and so he traveled to Midian, and there he met and married Zipporah, and so he served there for 40 years as the shepherd in chief there for his father-in-law Jethro. And so at the end of that time of 40 years, that's when the Bible talks about Moses being on the back, sort of the far side of the mountain, and the mountain being, of course, Sinai. That's where God appeared to him in the burning bush. So that's where he told Moses, okay, now you're going to go lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. So as they traveled out of Egypt and they were in the desert, then they used Moses' brother-in-law. They got a brother-in-law job there, so of Hobab, and he was very versed and very familiar with the ways of the desert and living in the desert, and so he was kind of their guide and helper, and so which it's okay, I mean, he wasn't really telling them where to go, because remember, it was God who was telling them where to go, with the pillar of smoke during the day and the pillar of fire by night, and that whenever that moved, then that's when the people would move. So that went along just fine, but then toward the end of that 40-year period, the Midianites, they joined forces with the Moabites, and they to hire Balaam to curse Israel. And so then later on, when Israel fell into idolatry and sexual sin with the Moabites, Moabite women, that actually there was the story of Pinchas, where there was a very prominent Midianite woman that was involved in all of that. And you remember the story that there was an Israelite prince or a chieftain that he got involved with. His name was Zimri, and he got involved with the daughter of a Midianite leader, and her name was Cosby, and so basically they defied God, and you remember the story where Pinchas went and skewered both of them with a spear, and then also Israel. There was a plague in Israel at the time then because of all of the sin. So Midianites were in on that. They were trying to curb the power of Israel. And so then Israelites did eventually attack the Midianites, and they just really killed up a lot of them. There were 5 kings of the Midianites, and and also Balaam. And this battle was basically this was one of the last things that Moses did as a leader of the Israelites. So during the time of the judges, the Midianites, the Amalekites, and other eastern people invaded the country, plundered the land, and for 7 years, Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they finally they cried out to help for the Lord, and God being who He was, He said, "Okay." And he's so patient. So He raised up Gideon then, of course, as a deliverer, and we go on from there. Now, this type of warfare that they were waging, it's very hard to defend against, because they would have these roving bands, and they just swoop through and take whatever it was they wanted. They had enough armed people that the Israelites couldn't really mount an army against them, because these guys would just swoop in and then right back out, and they wouldn't meet you on the battlefield, and it was always surprise attacks. And so, but it was very, very effective, and it had the effect of just really driving the Israelite economy underground and into hidey holes and caves and stuff like that, just to survive. And so it was a devastating blow to Israel. I mean, they just really could not have survived much longer. The 7 years of this kind of reminded me of the 7 years of famine in Egypt. Well, in fact, all over the Middle East, where then that's when Jacob moved down to Egypt, of course, and you know that story. So just wanted to show you a picture of where Midian was. And there it is. Here's the Gulf of Aqaba. And let's see. Here's a lot up here at the very top of the Gulf of Aqaba. That is part of Israel today. And then you go up a little bit toward the top up there, and you got Petra, which is in Jordan. But this is the Arabian Peninsula here, and here's Jabal al-Lawz, which is many people, myself included, believe is Mount Sinai, not the mountain over there where the Catholics have built a church on top of in Sinai Peninsula. But so this is where it was, and someplace over in this area here was where Moses was tending the sheep, and that's when he saw the burning bush. All right, so these were the Midianites here. They were they were really they were nomadic people. They traveled around. They followed where the grass was, because they had a lot of cattle. That was one of their characteristics. They had lots of camels and lots of cattle, and so they had to again travel around to where they could get the proper grass and forage for their animals. So, any questions so far on that? I think I may have. Okay, let's go ahead then with the rest of it. Then the angel of Adonai came and sat under the terebinth that was at Oprah, that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. Then the angel of Adonai appeared to him and said, Adonai is with you, O mighty man of valor. But Gideon said to him, O my Lord, if Adonai is with us, then why has all this befallen us? So where are all his wonders that our fathers told us about, saying, didn't Adonai bring us up from Egypt? But now Adonai has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. All right. So this is the angel of the Lord. And Clearly, old Gideon doesn't have a clue. He's totally clueless as to what who's talking to him. In fact, I always looked at this thing and I said, here they were out there. The Israel is being oppressed by Midian. Old Gideon is out there in a wine press, threshing wheat in because now if he's the wine would have been ready at a different time of the year, so the wine presses would be basically abandoned. There's nothing there for anybody to see or do. So the marauders, the raiders, probably would not have come into the wine presses at that time because there's nothing there, they think. And so Gideon is using that to his advantage, and he's over there with a mallet or however they did that in those days, threshing the wheat. And and then here he is working, beating that wheat around to get the husk and stuff off of it, and next thing you know, a guy says, "Hey, Gideon, oh man of valor, God is with you." And Gideon did not jump through his skin. I mean, he didn't. He wasn't terrified that somebody had found him now, because here he is in a hidey hole trying to thresh out some wheat so that they would have food to eat. And then all of a sudden, this guy appears, and I think this is probably the Cliff Notes version of what really happened. And so Gideon doesn't question him. He said, "Oh yeah, if God is with us, then why is all this stuff happening to us? Where are his wonders that our fathers told us about?" The same, actually, it's very similar to the same thing that happened to a lot of people in the Holocaust. Unfortunately, they looked at what was all around them, and they said, if there really is a God of Israel, why are we going through this? There must not be a God. And so many of them just lost their faith through the Holocaust, and which is really, really tragic. But and so Gideon is there saying, okay, if God is with me. In one of the versions, or you could read the Hebrew that says, where it said that God is with you. It's also could have been the word of God is with you. But I think it's kind of interesting here that the wording in this, they call it the angel of Adonai, the angel of Adonai, and then he's referring to, then he says, Adonai is with you. Again, in the third person, this angel is talking. So this place, Ophrah, and they say a terebinth tree. Well, a terebinth is kind of an oak, they tell me. So this tree, or Ophrah, is somewhere in the Manasseh territory. And you remember the Manasseh territory is over there on the east side of the Jordan, up there in Bashan, where they had defeated the King Og and King Sihon, and so that's where Manasseh was. That's where Gideon was. We don't really know where this place is today. They haven't found any altars that would tell us, but that's basically the best we could come up with as to where he was at the time. And so there again, I say that he did not respond. He didn't even he got called a man of valor, and he didn't turn around to this guy and tell him, "You talking to me?" No, it was just he just went on. He didn't even respond to it. Says, "Yeah, well, if God is with us, how come we're going through all this suffering?" So then I wanted to show you kind of what a wine press looked like back in those days. Now, this is more of I had some pictures that I took of a wine press, but they were from They were from the period about 700 AD, not 1000 um, BCE. So that there's almost 1700 years difference, and there was a little bit difference in the technology and so forth. The one I saw was in Katsrin, and it was a deal that they had built up, and they had tiled the whole inside of it, and it was all nice and neat. And so this stuff that we're talking about here, during those days, they would have just carved out a hole in the limestone and thrown the grapes in there, and then do the stomping of the grapes. And they would carry sticks. They would have some places they had sticks or poles that they could use to steady themselves so they wouldn't fall into the grapes. Other times they would have a pole or something on say either side, and then they would run a rope across, and so kind of like the handholds on buses and subways and so forth, where you can hang on to it. Well, on the little tramways in the airport, where they've got the thing to hold on to, sometimes they would have things like that for the people to kind of hold on to and steady themselves so they wouldn't fall into the grapes, because I guess it could get kind of slippery. Grape skins and all that could get kind of slippery. But what they would do is they would stomp on this stuff, and then if you can read, hopefully you can read this. It says the yeast from the skin of the grapes would begin fermenting the grape juice at the time of pressing. All right. And then they would put some kind of a filter material here, plant fibers, thorns, or something, and that would filter all of the grape juice out. And then it would pour into this trough and this vat or whatever. So they could plug it up, and then it would sit there and ferment. And so it would bubble up, and then after a few days, when the bubbling stopped, then the fermentation process was over. Basically, all of the sugars had turned into alcohol, and then they would put them in wine jars, and like it shows here, it says sometimes they would put olive oil on top of it, and that would help preserve it. But they could put it in wine skins, and it would last up to a year in the wine skins. But it was, remember when Yeshua said no one puts new wine in an old wine skin, because it would burst and then you would lose it all. So that it all goes back to how they did the making of the wine. Anybody got any questions on that? Okay. It would be very interesting to try to, what would the wine taste like back then? Where you stomp it out like that, and all it is juice that goes down into the rocks, and then they really didn't have that much of a filter to it. So I'm told that the wine was very strong and very thick, and so they would have to water it down a bit in order to drink it. So, all right, going ahead. There's a picture of the actual picture of a wine press, and so where here they would stomp on the grapes here, and then it would have this little trough there that would go down into this vat, and then they would pick the wine up from there. But I would imagine that maybe some of this stuff, it doesn't show it here, but perhaps it would have been they would have had plaster coatings on it to make it smoother. I know some of the plaster coatings that they had in their cisterns is still there are cisterns out there in Israel that are 2,000 years old that they've dug out, and then they plastered it with some kind of a cement material, and that cement material is still waterproof today. It's just amazing, just incredible that they could do that. And the Romans could build a road back in those days. They didn't have engineers. They didn't have all that technology, and they could build a road that lasted. It's so far. There's still roads over there in Europe that the Romans built that they're still using today as roadways, and they're 2,000, 2,500 years old, and we can't build here nowadays. They can't build a road that'll last a couple of years. So just kind of entertaining sometimes. All right, any questions? All right, going ahead in verse 14. Then Adonai turned toward him and said, "Go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you?" Then he said to him, "Me, my Lord, with what would I deliver Israel? Look, my family is the poorest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." But Adonai said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you will strike down Midian as if it were one man." All right. So Adonai he reveals himself to be the messenger, because then it's no longer saying the angel of Adonai. He's saying Adonai. And so then you go from there, and he says to go in this might, go in your might, that might that he has. Well, what might did he have? I mean, here's a guy that's over there threshing wheat in a wine press, so that trying to outsmart the Midianites, and instead of going out there and confronting them, he's just trying to get along and hide and stay away from them. So this go in might, it could have been where God had first said, "Oh, Gideon, you man of valor," which was maybe a prophecy, a prophetic word about Gideon, or it could just refer to Gideon's character. We don't know. The commentators that I read were, some of them say, "Oh yeah, because Gideon was a known courageous person, and that so God referring to him as the man, a great man of valor." It is just that because everybody knows he's a great hero and a man of valor. I don't read it that way, because I look at him as being much less of a man of valor based on some of the other things, like what we'll see here shortly in the fleece and other things. But Gideon is still making excuses there. He doesn't the kind of like some people, they always have to have the last word in, and so here he is. He says, I'm the poorest in Manasseh, poor me." Well, if he's the poorest guy in Manasseh, then Manasseh must be some really wealthy dudes, because he was able to go and overnight grab 10 of his servants, and then later on they pull down an altar to Baal. And so if they had 10 servants, that's poor in that time frame. So I think he was being a little bit disingenuous there. But a lot of these guys, when they were called by God, it was they would say, no, I can't do that. Moses said, I stutter and I'm slow of tongue. I just can't think of what to say. And so, but it also could be the Middle Eastern philosophy or the Middle Eastern way of doing things that you remember when Abraham was going to buy a field for um, burying Sarah, and he went to the local uh, chamber of commerce there at the city gate, and he said, "I would like to buy that field over there that's got those caves in it at Machpelah." And the indigenous folks there told him, "Here, you can just have a cave." And Abraham said, "Nope, nope, nope. I will buy it because I don't want anybody to say that you got something for nothing. I will buy it." And he said, "No, no, we'll give it to you." Abraham, "No, I'll buy it." And then finally it gets down to the guy that owns it, says, "Well, um, you know, really, we'll just give it to you because, what would be 400, I think it was 400 shekels or 400, whatever the medium was that they would use for the exchange, monetary exchange there. What is 400 shekels, let's for say, among friends? And so then that's code word. Abraham says, "Okay, 400 shekels it is." Boom, 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 boom. And he lays out the 400. And at that point, they put down the sandal and that the deal is concluded. So there's a lot of that going back and forth, and could have been that Gideon's the same way. He said, "Hey, we're the poorest in all of Manasseh, and I'm the least one. I'm the poorest one in my house." And I think he was just playing a game there. So, but God gives him the word. He says, "No, look, you go out there, you do this." And he says, "I will, you will." Well, in this case, he says, "I will be with you, and you will strike down Midian as if it were just one man." So, going ahead with that. Any questions or comments so far? Okay, then he said to him, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, then please show me a sign that it is really you talking with me. Please don't leave from here until I come to you and bring out my offering and lay it before you." And he said, "I will stay until you come back." And then Gideon went in and prepared a kid and matzot from an ephah of flour. He put the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, and brought them out to him under the terebinth and presented them. All right, now this is where old Gideon, figures out. Wait a minute, I bet you, and I bet you I'm behind in my slides again. All right, Gideon is, he's looking at this and he says, "Wait a minute, there's something's not quite right here." And so then that's when he looked at it and says, maybe I better make up an offering for this guy because there's something, he's heavenly or something. I don't know what it is, but I need to offer up something. So he offered up the offering, and he said, "Would you stay here until I can get it done?" And Adonai, he's very patient, long suffering. He said, "Sure, I'll wait." Because I've already created everything and it's not Shabbat yet. So yeah, I can wait. And so anyway, he's sitting there, waiting there. Now preparing this offering would have taken a while because he has to go out and get a goat and then slaughter it and skin it and get rid of all of the entrails and clean it up a little bit. Even if you did that all the time and you knew what you were doing, it would take a little bit of time. For any of you that have ever gone deer hunting and dressing out a deer, to do it properly, it takes a while to do it. Cutting out the skin, making sure that you don't nick any of the intestines and get the ookie gook into your meat, ruin it. So it would have taken a while for Gideon to put this all together. And so then he finally, and also baking the bread. So we know is probably he did not bake uh, a leavened bread, because that would have really taken a long time. And so he was just going to give him the matzah, the unleavened bread, kind of like a pita bread kind of a thing, which that's what a lot of times that's what they ate anyway. So um, he went in there and he prepared this meat. But then it's something that kind of got me going is as I looked, and it says, and he brought it out with the meat in a basket, the matzah, and he laid it all out on this big rock. And then he had a pan of broth. Now, I was thinking, okay, typically an offering and so forth, that is, that's a barbecue. That's where you take it and throw it up on the grill, and you burn it that way. But no, he had a broth. So how in the world could he come up with a broth? And the cooks in the crowd here, Charlie and Reba, they're really big into cooking and things that. All right, so they would know that. All right, if you got a broth involved in this, then you probably boiled it. So sure enough, I mean, he would have had to boil this stuff a little bit, and this would have taken hours actually. And so Adonai is very patient, sits back, enjoys the countryside, just looking at things under this oak, and with boiling the kid, that takes a while. But he came back with this pot of broth too. So another thing is, he says, and he made up the bread with an ephah of flour. Well, you know what an ephah is? Ephah. That is like 22 liters of flour. That's a lot. 22 liters, that would be 11 2-liter bottles, the 11 of the big 2-liter Coke bottles full of flour that you're going to make bread out of. So when you add water and all that kind of stuff to it, mash it all together, make the pita, you got enough bread there to feed 45 men their daily ration of bread. So that is, man, that is a lot of flour, totally out of proportion to what he would be giving this guy for a meal. All right. And if this were just a meal, this would be way out of proportion. But Gideon's looking at this. He's come to the conclusion, wait a minute, this is a heavenly visitor. I better really put on the dog. And so he brings him a lot of bread, and then the whole goat, that part of it was boiled, and then part of it would be roasted. So anybody got any comments or thoughts about all of that? Oh, quiet tonight, eh? All right. So going ahead, Judges 20 and 24. When the when the angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the matzah, lay them on this rock, and pour out the broth." So he did so. Then the angel of Adonai put the end of the staff that was in his hand, and he touched the meat and the matzah. Fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the matzah. Then the angel of Adonai vanished from his sight. When Gideon realized that he was the angel of Adonai, finally it dawned on him. Gideon then becomes very frightened, and he says, "Alas, my Lord Adonai, for I have seen the angel of Adonai face to face," meaning he's seen God face to face. And but Adonai said to him, "Shalom to you, fear not, you will not die." All right. So how did he do that? It said that Adonai vanished from there with Gideon, and then all of a sudden in the next couple of verses, you have Adonai, telling him, with the uh, I like to think of it, the big booming voice, but perhaps it was a smaller comforting voice. It's shalom to you, fear not, you will not die. So, I mean, we all know the story, how people would look at it back in those days. And the Bible says no man can look on God and live. He's just too big, too powerful, too awesome for us to look at. So, here he is, at this point saying, okay, I've seen God and now I know it. I'm just going to die. I know it. I just saw God. Now I'm going to die. And then God came to him and said, Shalom. You're not going to die. And so there, Gideon built an altar there to Adonai, I mean, just kind of spontaneously, and he called it Adonai Shalom. All right, God is peace. To this day, it is yet in Ophrah in the Abiezrites. Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Okay, whatever that last word is, hard word. And as of the writing of Judges, that stuff was still there. We don't know today where it is because it's been lost to the vagaries of history. All right. So Gideon then is commanded then to lay the meat, matzah on the rock, pour out the broth over the top of it. And when you read that, you think God is telling him, okay, put the meat on the rock, put the bread on the rock, and then toss the broth out. We don't want that. No, pour it on top. This is reminiscent, in my mind, to Elijah and the prophets of Baal, the 400 prophets of Baal, up on Mount Carmel, where he poured water on the altar and filled up the ditches, and then he called down fire from God. God came, put down the fire on it and burned up the altar and everything involved with it. And so, similar to this with Gideon, where Gideon just sees God reach over with his staff and touch the offering, and it said fire came up from the rock. So it's kind of interesting when you think of, okay, what kind of a staff would this visitor have had? Would he have had a walking stick, a shepherd's crook? Certainly, he would not have had some kind of a fancy scepter or something like that. So more likely just kind of looking a nondescript kind of walking stick. But then that burned up, and while this is burning, then Gideon kind of turns around and, oh yeah, where'd you go? Because God had vanished. So now he knows, okay, I've seen God, and I have seen God, and I'm going to die. And when I think of this, I think of the comedy there, and the name of it escapes me right now because I'm old. But it's where he's getting up there, he says, "We're gonna die," and so that's what Gideon is thinking. But God says, "No, shalom, peace. Don't worry about it. I got you." So go ahead. Now it came to pass the same night that Adonai said to him, "Take the young bull that belongs to your father, and a second bull of 7 years old. Pull down the altar of Baal that belongs to your father. Cut down the Asherah that is beside it." All right. So it says, "Build an altar to Adonai your God on top of this stronghold in an orderly manner, and take the second bull and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah pole that you will cut down." So Gideon took 10 of his male servants. Again, he's so poor, bless his heart. He only had 10 male servants to help him there, and he did as God told him to do. But since he was too afraid of his father's household and the townspeople to do it by day, he did it by night, which is more incredible because here he is. He's got 10 servants of his own that he used. and not servants from his father's household, because he was afraid that they would out him. All right, so this is, build an altar on top. So Gideon took 10 male servants, did exactly what God told him to do. And he did it, though, at night, which is probably a good thing to do, because otherwise he might have been stopped by the townspeople or something. Certainly would have been, if they had known what's going on, based on what they said the next day. So it must have been a pretty good sized altar. It took 10 men to destroy it, and then the altar to Adonai was built on top of that, and in the ultimate insult to the local little g gods, the Asherah pole was chopped up and used as the flames for the offering to God. All right, and I took a picture when I was at Megiddo. And this was an altar that somebody had. I mean, this is a Canaanite altar. This is what it looked like. They'd kind of restored it and built it back up a little bit. You see right there in the middle, some bozo had gone out there and laid in the middle of it. But that's what one of those altars would have looked like, and so. It could have been smaller than that. Something we don't really know what the one that Gideon destroyed would have looked like, but something similar to that with stones stacked up on top of it. And there's a picture that I found with him destroying cutting down the Asherah pole. So, comments, questions? All right, we need to finish off here. We're getting close. Now, when the townspeople rose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was broken down. The Asherah pole that was beside it was cut down, and the second bull was offered up on the altar that was built. So they said one another, "Who did this thing?" And when they inquired and asked around, they said, "Gideon, son of Joash, did this thing." Then the townspeople said to Joash, "Bring out your son that he may die, because he has broken down the altar of Baal and even cut down the Asherah pole that was beside it." But Joash said to all who stood against him, "So you're going to defend Baal? You're going to rescue him? Whoever defends him will be put to death in the morning. If he is good, let him defend himself, since someone has broken down his altar." So here we see Joash. It is the strangest thing to me, because Joash, it said that his father, that altar and stuff was his father's. It was the altar of Joash. Well, Gideon, Israelite, father, Israelite. What in the world is he doing with a big altar to Baal? So at that moment, then Joash had to choose. All right, do I stay with what I was doing before and being, this having this altar, even though I'm Jewish, I'm an Israelite, or do I stay with the crowd, or do I say, nope, I'm going to, stand up for my son? So fortunately, Joash, the keeper of the pagan altar there, he kind of morphed into a defender of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So just right there, he had to make the decision, and fortunately, Joash made the proper decision. And when the people, said, "We got to kill him. Come out here. We're gonna kill your son because he tore down this altar." And Joash then, I think, certainly by the Spirit of God in him, said, "Hey, wait a minute. If he's torn down this altar, if Baal is so strong and such a big deal, he'll get revenge on Gideon. Uh, it's all there. If your God is that big, he'll get Gideon. And if he's not, then he really wasn't a God at all anyway, was he?" And so basically, they turn around and rename Gideon. I guess they renamed him. I don't know who renamed him, but it was his the name of it was, his new name meant, well, let God let Baal take care of himself. And so that was the name that we're going into this now, Jerubbaal. And now, growing up in the deep South, that was not Jerubbaal. That was not Jerubbaal. It was Jerubbaal. And that was always a fun word to say in Sunday school, Jerubbaal. And but there is no J in Hebrew, so it'd be Jerubbaal. Jerubbaal. All right. So, and it means let Baal contend with him, since he broke down his altar. So let Baal take care of himself. Now all the Midianites, the Amalekites, the people of the east gathered together and crossed over and encamped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Ruach Adonai clothed Gideon, and he blew the shofar, and Abiathar rallied behind him. Then he sent messengers throughout Manasseh, and they also rallied behind him. Then he sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they came to join them. So now, Gideon has this new name, Jerubbaal, and it's kind of, there's a couple of different ways you could look at it, but I think what they were talking about is that says, let Baal fight back. So what? Big deal. Let him fight his own battles. So now what we've got, though, is we've set the stage that we'll talk about next week. Then the stage is now set for this battle against an army and not just bands of the raiders. So they're finally getting Midian, the Amalekites, to coalesce together into an entity that they can actually fight, rather than these ghosts that are just whipping in and out and damaging the crops, or damaging so much of the economy of Israel. So Gideon was indeed anointed. I mean, if he could go out there and blow his shofar, he's from Manasseh, he's from over on the other side of the tracks, on the east side of the Jordan, but he can go over there into the west side and say, okay, it's time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. And he puts out a draft notice, and it's just full of people. Everybody's wanting to go and fight against Midian. So he definitely had that mojo working right there, and getting all of his people, getting all these people to come and follow him. So Gideon said to God, if you're going to deliver Israel by my hand, as you have spoken, see, I'm putting a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there's dew only on the fleece, and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will deliver Israel by my hand, as you have spoken. And it was so. When they rose up early the next morning, he squeezed the fleece and wrung dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. Wow. Okay. So then Gideon said to God, let not your anger burn against me if I speak once more. And let me please test just once more with the fleece. Let it now be dry only on the fleece, but then let all of the dew be all over the ground. And God did so that night, and since it was dry only on the fleece, and there was dew all over the ground. So I wanted to show you, I don't know if any of you have ever actually seen a raw fleece. This is kind of what a raw fleece would look like. When they shear it, from the sheep or the alpaca, whatever kind of critter that they're cutting the fur off of. It's better if you can get it like this in one kind of big deal, because then that way it makes for the cleaning and the carding and everything else that they do, makes it much easier to work with. So don't know if any of you had ever seen a big fleece like this before, but kind of interesting. And so Gideon wanted to make sure that he had heard from God, and he just so there again, it makes me think that Gideon was not the man of valor that not yet that God had called him to. I mean, and it was probably a prophetic word then, where it says, Gideon, you mighty man of valor. And I can just imagine Gideon looking around and seeing, okay, what what me, a mighty man of valor? No. So then that verse that talks about God being he's long suffering. Meaning he's just got so much patience. To me, that is epitomized in this story of Gideon here, where God is just so patient with, Gideon says, let me go make an offering. So he says, okay, I'll just be here. I don't have any place else to go other than, maybe the next galaxy over, but I'll stick around a little while. And Gideon comes back then with the offering and so forth, and then in the next instance, he's talking about let's do this fleece here, and so that made God God told him to do one thing one way, and then he said, okay, let's see if we can do it the other way and make it work. And he's looking for a way out. He didn't get it. So that sets the stage then for next week, when we talk about Gideon and the, coming against the Midianites. I got a real neat map that shows all of the arrows of this, the army coming down this way and the other army coming this way, and then got one of those big starbursts that says, oh yeah, something big happened here. There was a battle here. And so I got one of those for you next week, along with some other things too. And so with that, are there any